All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Navigating the Clerkship Process for Students of Color and First Generation Law Students, co-sponsored by the American Constitution Society and the Appellate Project. My name is Thea Cohen, and I'm the Director of Strategic Engagement for ACS, the nation's leading network of progressive lawyers. Part of our mission is building up the next generation of progressive and public interest attorneys through programming, career development, and help today, most relevantly, with the clerkship application process. Because a clerkship is a near prerequisite to becoming a judge, we see the clerkship assistance program as an extension of our path to the bench work. The judges confirmed in 15 to 20 years will mainly come from the pool of law clerks today. Accordingly, we place special emphasis on helping talented and progressive students with diverse backgrounds and experiences find clerkships. In addition to public programs like this one, we can help individual members navigate this sometimes opaque and highly competitive process. Each year, we match students and new graduates with former clerks in the ACS network as part of our mentor matching program. We also select approximately 40 students and new graduates as part of our clerkship assistance cohort. And this is a group of future progressive and public interest leaders that will receive special help with their clerkship application process, which includes counseling sessions with me, help with strategy and review of materials, as well as connections to former clerks and others in our network that can help. The goal of this program is to give connections, knowledge, and to support to students who may not have had those advantages coming into law school. And we're also looking for candidates who will be part of the ACS network throughout their career and share their experience as mentors for the next generation that follows them. I'm going to drop a link to the application to that program, which the program closes in 2 days, the application, at the end of this program, but I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll hand it over to our wonderful moderator, Carrie Montgomery.
Thank you, Thea. Good evening, everyone. My name is Carrie Montgomery. I'm an attorney at the law firm WilmerHale, and I am based in their DC office. I'm here representing the Appellate Project, also known as TAP. TAP's mission is to empower law students of color to thrive in the appellate field. We provide programming designed to empower law students of color, particularly those most underrepresented, to become the next generation of lawyers and judges in our highest courts. This includes a mentorship program where we pair law students from diverse and underrepresented backgrounds who are interested in appellate practice with mentors who are experienced appellate practitioners. We also provide students with clerkship support, networking opportunities with the appellate bar, skill building workshops, one-on-one legal writing review, guidance on appellate job opportunities, and more. I will provide more details about TAP, including TAP's clerkship handbook, which provides a step-by-step guide on navigating the clerkship process. But speaking of the clerkship process, I am so excited to be moderating this panel of esteemed judges. Our judges today collectively represent state and federal courts at the trial and appellate levels in different geographical areas. We have Judge Latrice Westbrooks, who is a judge in the Mississippi Court of Appeals. We have Judge Kenia Seoane Lopez, who is a judge in the DC Superior Court. And we have Judge Denny, who is a judge in the Second Circuit. Judge Chen was also formerly a district court judge in the Southern District of New York. So that we don't prolong this any longer, let's get started. Judges, could you please start off by telling us about your journey to the bench? And we can start with you, Judge Westbrooks.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to participate on the panel. As you've mentioned, my name is Latrice Westbrooks. I've been on the Mississippi Court of Appeals since January of 2017. Before that, I was a practicing attorney here in Jackson, Mississippi, but my practice extended all the way through the Mississippi Delta. I graduated from the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. From there, after graduation, I took the Mississippi Bar, and I started clerking for a circuit court judge by the name of John Whitfield. I apologize. I started clerking for Judge John Whitfield, and the district attorney in my area on the Gulf Coast was interested in hiring me. And when he hired me, I became the first African-American woman to serve as a prosecutor on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. After prosecuting, I decided to go into private practice, and I did a bit of civil litigation for about a year, and then I decided to open up my own firm in 2001. And in that capacity, I did a lot of criminal defense work, and I realized that I did have a love for doing criminal defense work. And so I became a public defender in one of the rural areas here in Mississippi, Holmes County, Mississippi. And from there, I started doing also civil litigation. I also litigated school to prison pipeline cases and other civil cases, personal injury cases, just a bevy of things. But my love was criminal defense work. And it was that type of work that got me noted and recognized. I also did expungement work and ended up working with the NAACP and other civic organizations that also did that type of public interest work, and often volunteered my time or offered pro bono litigation for those who could not afford it. But my road to the bench, with all that said, started in 2012, and I had been approached and asked it passively about, considering my future. But it wasn't until 2012 when I was approached by a friend who said, I want to meet with you. I have something I want to talk to you about something that's going to change your life. And quite frankly, and I tell this story all the time because it's the truth. I really thought they were going to introduce me to my fiance. And that was not the case. So they sat me down and talked to me about seriously considering running for the Court of Appeals. And I thought it was a daunting task. My district covers 24 counties. And so it's consistent with the 2nd Congressional District here in Mississippi, which goes all the way up the Mississippi Delta, down to South Mississippi, and covers a lot of central Mississippi. And so I really started to consider it. I prayed about it. And every judge here in Mississippi, except for municipal judges, are elected. So I went through the process of even considering the campaign. I spoke with some mentors, and upon getting some positive feedback, I ran for office. I was unsuccessful in 2012. I was actually disqualified because I did not live in the district, but I did not give up. I was encouraged and inspired to go ahead and run again in 2016. And in 2016, I successfully won my seat, and I have been serving on the court ever since. As a matter of fact, I just finished an 8-year term. So here in Mississippi, the appellate court judges have 8-year terms. And I just actually am running unopposed for my 2nd term with the Court of Appeals.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Judge Westbrooks. Judge Chen, do you want to go next?
Sure. I've been a federal judge for almost 30 years. The first 15 and a half as a district judge, trial judge, and then since then as a circuit judge on the 2nd Circuit. I actually took senior status about 2 years ago. That means that I have a slightly reduced caseload. I still hear cases, but as a consequence, I'm also doing trial work again. Last year, I tried 3 criminal cases in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn. And just a couple of weeks ago, I tried a civil case here in the Southern District of New York. I'm designated to sit in both the Eastern and the Southern districts. And my heart really is in the trial court, where there's a lot more action and you're on your own. You don't need a second vote to have a majority. And leading up to the bench, I did a lot of different things. I clerked in the Southern District of New York. I went to a big law firm, Davis Polk and Wardwell, for a couple of years. I then joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York on the civil side. I then did something a little bit different, like Judge Westbrooks. I started a law firm with 2 colleagues. We had a small law firm. 3 of us left the U.S. Attorney's Office and started a law firm. That was fun, but we didn't make enough money. And eventually, after about 4 years, we went our separate ways, and I went to the Vladeck Waldman firm, where I did labor and employment law on the plaintiff side and the union side for a number of years. And then from there, in 1994, I was appointed by President Clinton to the Southern District of New York. And I actually decided in my 1L summer, after 1 year of law school, that I would become a judge someday. I was interning for Judge Henry Worker here in the building where I am now. And I just loved the experience. In particular, I loved the trials. And I decided that one day I would come back and be a trial judge in the Southern District of New York. I figured that I also wanted to be an AUSA. I remember watching a bank robbery trial and thinking what a cool job this was. And then I figured out that to be an assistant, I would first have to go to a big firm for a while. And I wanted to clerk. And I also, for some reason, wanted my own law firm. And so when I graduated from law school, I did all of those things. The one thing that I didn't plan on was to go to a labor and employment firm. It was about a 40-lawyer firm at the time, but I got to work with the great Judith Vladeck, one of the real pioneers in employment discrimination law. I'll stop there.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Judge Chen. Judge Lopez?
Good evening, everyone. So it's really interesting how I ended up here because I wouldn't have imagined being here. But I am an associate judge at the DC Superior Court. And I immigrated from Cuba as a child to Boston. Had no idea why my family took that trip, why we did what we did until the summer of junior year in high school. Somebody handed me in the library, and I was just sitting in the cafeteria. Someone handed me a program application for the Judicial Youth Corps, which was a brand new program that was started by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court and the Massachusetts Bar. At that time, I was fighting a very long battle with my mother to get a part-time job because I wanted to buy my own Gap clothes and my Converse sneakers at that time. And I was the youngest of four, and she was not having it because the other kids kind of got some independence once they got a part-time job. So she was holding on to me. And I saw that program and I was like, my mom would never say no to this because it's educational. And so I applied to this program. Long and behold, I thought I was, being sneaky to my mom. And I ended up finding a career. At the age of 17, was working at the Boston Housing Court. I was working there all summer. They provided some leadership programs in the Fridays, and I was the only person who spoke Spanish in the whole court. And so they had me interpreting cases and really just saw, the essence of people's really like their home. Like this is really important. Like people are losing their homes, and some of them could barely write. Some of them, I would ask them to sign here, and they just didn't know how to write. They were illiterate. And so I saw how the landlord had, all of them had attorneys, and the attorneys were well known to the court staff, and they kind of bent over backwards to assist them. And I thought that this was really unfair. I just saw the need for someone like me who looked like me and spoke the language that I spoke. And after that summer, I came back to school with that renowned interest, and not to say there's anything wrong with being a hairdresser, but that's kind of where I was going. I had already visited the beauty school that I wanted to go to. I changed shift 360. Like, I'm going to go to Northeastern. Somebody told me that Northeastern University has a good criminal justice program. I had never been to the Northeastern campus, even though I grew up in Boston. But I was like, I'm going to apply there. And I went to my guidance counselor. It was one guidance counselor for the whole senior class. She was overwhelmed, and you had to get there 7:20 to see her. And I said to her, I want to go to Northeastern and study criminal justice. And she said, you're not going to get in. And she wouldn't at that time hand me an application, which at that time there was no internet, and that's the only way you can get an application to a college is if you went to her. And I remember reaching over her and just opening up the file cabinet and pulling out the Northeastern application. And I remember going upstairs to my last period and just so angry. I filled out my application and mailed it. Luckily, at that point, they didn't ask for any essays, so I didn't have to write any. You know, I got into Northeastern through this program with the African American Institute that was actually geared to kids like me from the inner city who went to not good public schools, to kind of bridge that gap between, you know, college and for education that I had in public school. And when I went to the guidance council, said I got in, she said, "Oh, they're admitting everybody now, aren't they?" Now this color who had gone to Northeastern herself, and I was just devastated. I was like, I'm going to prove to her. So I went to Northeastern and I took advantage of the co-op program, and I fell in love with the criminal justice system, the administration of justice in general. And I said, if I don't get into law school, then I would be happy working anywhere within the criminal justice system. So I was thinking about probation at that point. But I finding CLEO, the Council on Legal Education Opportunities, which is also a nonprofit, I ended up getting a fellowship in Washington, D.C. with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute right after college, ended up coming to D.C. And I ended up meeting these people at these happy hours that, oh, I came to D.C. 25 years ago for an internship. And I said, that is not going to be me. I hate this place. I was like, I'm here for 1 year and then I'm out. And then the cherry blossoms came out, and I just fell in love with the city and the dynamic place that DC is. And here I am. I'm one of those people now to say I came here for a fellowship 25 years ago. And so I ended up doing that public policy fellowship. I found out that the political world and working at the Hill was not for me. As I say, I ran away from the Hill as fast as I could. And I ended up going to law school. I went to a pre-law institute. I was going to go back to Boston and go to Northeastern Law School. I was all in. I used to study at the law school. I worked there as a work study student. I had the Black's Law Dictionary with the Northeastern logo on it. And then I went to the summer program, and they had colleges come and recruit. And the University of Wisconsin came, and I ended up interviewing with them. And they gave me this great package. And I was like, where's Wisconsin on the map? Let me find it. That's where I'm going to go. So I ended up going to the University of Wisconsin Law School, and I haven't regretted it. It was really a great experience to go there. And it allowed me to actually focus on public interest work, because I got a fellowship as a result of this program. And I paid very little for law school, although I paid a lot for undergrad. But it allowed me to focus on public service. I wanted to be a public interest lawyer, and I couldn't take on a lot of debt and to be able to do that. So I went, I was again sitting in my classroom, and some friend of mine was like, "You're from Boston, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she gave me this application for a clerkship and for the Massachusetts Superior Court. And so I was like, "Oh, I'll apply." And so I applied, and I ended up getting that clerkship just by happenstance. It just happened to be in places where people are giving you stuff and telling you about different programs. Like I found out about the CLEO program by working at the co-op office. Somebody had gone through the program and told me about it. And so it was all like just by chance that I kind of ended up where I needed to be. And I ended up going to Wisconsin. I clerked in Massachusetts for a year or two, and then I decided I need to come back to DC. And I ended up clerking for the DC Superior Court with some senior judges. And one of the judges I clerked for was a former chief judge of the court. And one day he said to me, "Have you ever thought about becoming a magistrate judge?" And I was like, "Oh, Judge, you're so nice." No, thanks. Like I just never even thought like I could be a judge. I just held them in such high regard, and it's like, "Oh, you're just being super nice to me." But you know, he passed away untimely and suddenly, and I said I was going to apply for the next vacancy just to honor his memory, because I he was actually in magistrate judges in the district superior court are picked by the chief judge. And so I felt like, well, he saw something in me. He's the one who picks the magistrate judges. And so I said I would honor his memory, and I applied and didn't think I was going to get it because most people don't get on the first try, but I ended up getting it the first time I applied. And I think he had something to do with it from high above. And so I became a magistrate judge and was in that role for about 10 years. but in between the magistrate judge applying for a judge, I went to the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia, and I represented the district in child support cases in both the domestic violence unit and family court as well. And I did that for about 4 years, and then I came to the court as a bilingual attorney negotiator in the domestic violence division. So I was kind of the person that spoke to the parties before they saw the judge. And I thought that was a really good role in terms of me being impartial and not having clients, and kind of getting used to that thought process of being an independent, not looking at a client's perspective, but also explaining legal concepts to people who were pro se and didn't have attorneys. And so I did that for 4 years, and then I became a magistrate judge. About 2 years ago, last Friday, I was confirmed by the U.S. Senate. For most people don't know that DC is actually not a state, it's a district. And so our superior court, which is our trial level court, is quasi-federal. And so since we don't have a governor, our judges are our associate judges are appointed by the President of the United States, confirmed by the Senate. And so I was appointed by Biden and confirmed by the Senate about 2 years ago for a 15-year term in Superior Court. So I have about 13 more years to go on my term. But that's kind of where I am today. I sit in a family court. I just started it every year. We kind of rotate throughout the courthouse. I was in domestic violence for the last 2 years, and now I'm in family domestic relations. And that's my story.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for sharing your journey to the bench. To get started talking about just the law clerkship hiring process, could you all provide just like an overview of your court, the type of cases you handle, and how you use your law clerks? And I think we can start this time with Judge Chen. And Judge, I think you're on mute.
My email was binging, so I decided to mute myself. I'm in the Second Circuit, and so we are an appellate court. We sit in panels of 3. We get cases brought to us from New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. And so all the district courts send their cases up to us. It's the whole gamut of federal cases. Of course, we even get state law cases in diversity cases. One of the things I've always liked about the federal system, including the trial court, is that we get to do both criminal and civil. In many courts, many state courts, you do one or the other, or it's a specialized court. And one of the things I enjoy about what we do is the variety. Because we're in New York City, we get a lot of substantial commercial cases, securities cases. We certainly get our share of constitutional cases. The last few years, we had a lot of COVID-related cases, vaccination cases, we get a lot of interesting copyright and other IP cases. The one thing we don't get in the Second Circuit is patent cases. The patent cases go to the federal circuit. Although as a trial judge in the courts within the Second Circuit, you do get patent cases, which is always ironic, as most trial judges are generalists. And I remember it was a challenge to do a patent case. Our job in the circuit is mostly reading and writing. We do a fair amount of reviewing work of other judges. We hear cases in panels of 3. The presiding judge will draft most of the summary orders, and indeed we decide most of our cases by summary orders, which are short written decisions, 5 pages, 10 pages. The opinions are divided among the different panelists, and the opinions, of course, are more substantial documents. But part of the process is we will review other judges' opinions, they will review my opinions, and there's this back and forth. And if someone wants a dissent, then there will be, of course, more back and forth. But it's a very collaborative process. Every once in a while, we have an en banc argument, which means there will be at least 13 judges sitting on the panel. If there were any senior judges on the original panel, then there could be as many as 15 judges. We did an en banc last year with 15 judges on the panel. You can imagine if you're the lawyer arguing an appeal and you look up and there are 15 judges there, what a daunting task that is. And I'll say a few words about the trial court. You're there to do trials, although these days, most cases don't go to trial. In fact, few cases go to trial. But of course, there are criminal trials, there are civil trials, but there'll be other types of hearings, preliminary injunction motions. An important part of the district court process is sentencing people. It's one of the hardest things that judges can do, and that is to decide whether to send someone to prison, and if so, for how long. I think in terms of clerking, the district court is more challenging and probably more fun because you're doing a greater variety of things. You have to draft a jury charge. You have to help with evidentiary issues. Depending on the judge, you may help with sentencing. You're writing opinions. You're helping with docket control. And in that sense, depending on the judge, how the judge handles things, you might be communicating with the lawyers and dealing with the lawyers. In the Court of Appeals, the clerkship is like an extension of law review. It's mainly virtually all writing and research, either writing bench memos or drafting summary orders if your judge is still an active judge, or drafting opinions. My clerks are lucky right now because I'm actually doing both. And so they are getting a taste of both the trial court and the appellate court.
Thank you so much, Judge Chen, for providing an overview of the Federal District Court and the Federal Circuit Court. Judge Lopez, do you want to give us an overview of your court, the DC Superior Court?
Sure. So DC only has one courthouse, and everything pretty much happens here. There are 5 divisions, and we do everything that you need to have done in a state court: criminal, probate, civil, family, domestic violence. And so it's a really busy court. And the judges are appointed to serve on the court, and the chief judge decides what assignments we get based on the needs of the court. And so every year around October, it's a very stressful time because that's when the chief puts out the schedule for the next year. And so it's really important to know that if you're applying to a clerkship to someone in Superior Court, that you understand that you may be applying, but next year they may be in a different docket altogether. And sometimes we don't know if we're going somewhere else. And so you may be having to write a cover letter about how you love family law and that's all you ever want to do, but the judge may actually be switched to civil the next year. And so that's just part of the nature of the beast here. We are always learning a new area of law. I find it really refreshing to move to a new division and just learn new things, and every so often. And it keeps things, I think, interesting and fresh. And you also deal with a whole new different types of lawyers as well, and of parties. And so right now I'm in a domestic relations because of the way that we told you that we get judges through the Senate. We have a lot of vacancies. We have about 12 right now, 13 by the end of this month. We have another person retiring. And so the way that we've dealt with that is the chief has actually allowed some of the heavy calendars with motions and orders to have a third law clerk. So I now have 3 law clerks. One of them is temporary. They get renewed every so often. But we also have the ability to have 1 law clerk and 1 judicial administrative assistant. Some of the judges can choose to make 2 law clerk positions instead of having a judicial administrative assistant. I think the majority of judges are doing that these days just because there's so much legal work that needs to be done. And You could have a judicial administrative system who does a lot of the, short orders or something like that. But in terms of longer term research projects, it's difficult for them to do. And so I went with the two law clerk model. It has its drawbacks, but in terms of the institutional knowledge and all the judges, we have about 62, well, when we're fully staffed, we have 62 associate judges, we have 26 magistrate judges, and then we have some senior judges as well, who actually fill in. Some senior judges also hire law clerks. But they are working in a pool with other senior judges, so they share since they're not always in court. So I have three actually now full-time law clerks, and they do everything: case prep, running the docket, writing longer-term orders. We also have to do some criminal motion, post-conviction motions. When judges retire, each judge who's sitting gets assigned a judge who retired, and so we get all of those judges post-conviction motions. So any compassionate release motions, any motions for an effective assistance of counsel of that sort. We also have kind of a side, everybody's doing this side criminal work as well, in addition to your regular calendar every day, depending, no matter what division you're on. And so the law clerks really do everything in chambers, from answering the phone to making sure that I'm prepared for court, to communicating with the parties, to working on some of those longer term orders. And when I have a trial, I have one of the law clerks with me, and the law clerk will work with me to get those orders out, the longer trial orders. And then we take turns being in court. I'm always in court. They take turns being in court. And so that's kind of how we do it. Every judge hires different. Some judges have it so that they do 2 years. And so the law clerk stagger. So there's always one senior clerk at any given time. And then they kind of train each other. And some judges hire 2 years in advance. Some are hiring in August to start like that trial period from August for a year. So I think the best thing for our court is if you just look on the website, all the judges' chambers are listed on there with their numbers. Literally just call every chambers and ask them, are you accepting an application for summer internship, for example, or fall internship, or, a clerkship for the academic year of this year to that year, depending, because some of them do hire 2 years in advance. I wish I had a better answer, but the question is, it depends. The answer is it depends. So really do your research in terms of who's actually accepting applications, and then I would then narrow it down based on like what if you think you want to do only criminal, then see who's in criminal at that time. But again, with the caveat that they may not be in criminal for a very long time.
Thank you so much, Judge Lopez. I'll pass it over to Judge Westbrooks.
Thank you. The Mississippi Court of Appeals is a 10-member court, and we hear cases that are assigned to us by the Supreme Court. So whenever someone files a notice of appeal, that notice of appeal, and once the record is completed, it goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decides whether or not it wants to keep it. If they don't want to do any heavy lifting, they'll send it to us. And so we will handle cases as an en banc court. So we start handling cases and listening to cases and deciding on cases as a 3-member panel. But once that 3-member panel has decided how it wants to decide a matter, we will circulate that opinion, that proposed opinion, to the other 7 members of the court. And every judge has an opportunity to weigh in on the case, as in Judge Chin mentioned earlier. Every judge has an opportunity to vote. Every judge has an opportunity to write in dissent on the case. And so the Court of Appeals here in Mississippi, I don't know about any place else, but the Court of Appeals here in Mississippi can be very interesting and very titillating at times. And so depending on the types of cases that we are working on. And so we hear a myriad of cases. We hear everything from divorces, personal injury cases, to capital murder cases, except those cases where the death penalty, someone has actually been sentenced to death. And so that type of case, along with a small number of other cases, are specifically reserved for the Mississippi Supreme Court. So you have annexation cases. We do not hear those. That goes to the Mississippi Supreme Court. Although we may hear a case that deals with a slight issue, a sub-issue of annexation, but the annexation issue itself goes before the Mississippi Supreme Court. We don't hear election contest issues. We don't hear cases dealing with utilities or anything of that nature. All of those cases go to the Supreme Court. We also normally don't hear cases where a statute has been challenged as unconstitutional. Normally, those cases go before the Mississippi Supreme Court as well, but there are times we will hear those types of cases. Also, there are cases, all cases of a great public concern usually go before the Supreme Court, but there are times, as we have had recently, cases of great public concern do come before the Supreme Court. And so we really prepare ourselves to hear any and everything that happens here in the state. And this is, we sit in Jackson, Mississippi. This is the only courthouse in the state that hears every matter that happens in the state. And so we do have a chief judge, and we have two presiding judges. Every judge on the court has two law clerks and their own personal court administrator that we call judicial assistants. The court itself has a court administrator, a main court administrator, as does the Supreme Court. But every judge has a full-time law clerk, two full-time law clerks. I myself have two full-time law clerks, and I also open up the doors for externships. And externships, I have had externs from the law schools, and I've also opened it up to universities that have a pre-law program where college students are preparing themselves to go to law school. And especially if that college, like Tougaloo College, has a relationship with law schools where they have created a strong pipeline for college students to go to law school. And so right now I have two externs from Tougaloo College. And I'm also looking for an extern from the University of Mississippi School of Law to come in this summer. And so with our cases, we are an error corrections court. And so we look for cases where the facts may be in dispute, but the law is settled. But every once in a while, we will get cases where the law is unsettled or where the law is questionable. And we write on those cases. We more recently, when I say we, I mean really me, have written on a case where the law, in my opinion, does not uplift humanity, or definitely does not move the legal profession forward. And it happened to be a Supreme Court case, and I happened to write a dissent at telling the Supreme Court that this is a case that I believe that you need to consider, and possibly even look at how this is impacting litigation, look how it's impacting civil procedure. And so every once in a while, we'll get those types of cases. The judges, we do collaborate. As I said, every case is an en banc case. And so with our three member panels, and sometimes it's four, because like I said, it's a 10-member court. And I'll tell you how those decisions hand down with a 10-member court in just a moment. But we will collaborate with one another. We will talk about the cases before we go to panel. And before panel, I will give each judge a courtesy copy of my opinion. And what does that do? That helps with the panels to go a lot smoother, a lot more efficiently. And it helps us get down to business. So you can look at a case that has 3 or 4 issues, and a judge may tell me, Judge Westbrooks, I agree with you on 2 or 3 of these issues. Let's talk about the other 2. And the other judge may or may not agree, but it helps streamline our panel discussions and make them much more effective and efficient. The other thing that we do, once those cases go to the full court, same process. And once a judge decides that he or she wants to write, then we will have another process where we'll go back and forth and we will share opinions before it gets to be circulated to the rest of the court. And we'll decide whether or not I want to adopt that person's opinion. If I don't, then I will go forward with my opinion. He or she will go forward with theirs. And we will circulate 2 opinions to the entire court. And depending on how the votes fall, I may keep the majority of votes. If I don't, then I will then be flipped, as we call it, and I'll become the dissent or the separate opinion. And if it holds, then that's the way the opinions will be published to the public. Now, once the opinions are published, of course, we go through the process of a motion for rehearing. Once that period has passed, and likely we will deny the motion for rehearing if the circumstance is warranted. If it doesn't, if we think that there is a valid issue for us to be concerned about, we will actually pull our opinions. We'll pull it and we'll issue a modified opinion that is consistent with the facts of the case or consistent with consistent with the law. Once we've done that, then a mandate will soon fall down. If not, then the Supreme Court would have an opportunity to review our decision. If the Supreme Court declines to review our decision, because our Supreme Court is a court of discretion, if they decide to not hear our case or take up our case on cert, then our decision will stand and it will become part of the case law of the land. And my law clerks are very involved in my decision making. They help me out a great deal. The Court of Appeals last year heard almost 440 cases last year alone. And so our law clerks, we could not do what we do and turn over that amount of cases. And let me just say, that's the norm. With COVID, it fell down a little bit, but now we're on the uptick. And so my law clerks are very involved with helping me make a decision on the case. And we collaborate with one another, and they give me advice. If I decide I want to take it, then I will take their advice. If not, then if I tell them I do want to go another course, or I believe this decision needs to happen this way, I'm going to ask questions about the case. As you know, and that's, and I think where our experiences as judges and previous litigators come in, we can look at a case and help guide them and say, well, listen, perhaps you need to consider this before I want to affirm or reverse. Let's look at these facts. Tell me if this happened. If this happened, I'm likely going to go ahead and decide a certain way. And so, but my law clerks are very involved. Once the case comes in, the case goes to them. They will give me a memo on whether or not I should grant oral argument. I will consider the memo. If I decide to give oral argument, we'll immediately put that on the calendar to get scheduled so we can notify the attorneys and notify the other judges who are part of that panel. If not, then we get the case ready for our panel discussion. And so once that happens, again, we go back through the process that I just mentioned earlier. But my law clerks are very much involved. The issues that we address here at the Court of Appeals are very interesting. And I love the way my law clerks look at a case and get involved in it. And they really get into the record. They really become really interested in what happened, and they can really look at the record and say, this is what happened in trial. I'm not really sure this should have happened, Judge. And they're able to give me really good, solid advice on how I should handle a matter. So that's the way the Court of Appeals handles its cases. The Supreme Court is not that much different. With the Mississippi Supreme Court, there is a central legal unit that reviews the cases before the justices get it. And so unlike the Supreme Court, we don't have a central legal department here. We just have our staff attorneys. We have 3 staff attorneys that help all of the judges. And as I mentioned, each judge has their own set of law clerks, 2 law clerks.
Thank you, Judge Westbrooks. And thank you also for mentioning externships, which is a great way for law students to get insight into being a law clerk. We do have some questions from the audience, and the audience members should feel free to drop any questions they have in the question box. But before I turn there, I do want to ask one more question before turning to the audience members' questions. And pretty much all of you have great backgrounds. You work on some great courts with interesting cases. So for students who are ready to apply right now to your chambers, where do they start and what do they need to do to make themselves stand out? Like, what exactly are you looking for when you hire a law clerk? And I think this time we can start with Judge Lopez.
Yeah, so first of all, I view a clerkship as an apprenticeship program. It's really an extension of learning. So you really have to be open to learning new things. You have to be flexible. And you have to understand that we're all public servants, first and foremost. And what that means is there's always more work than there's ever time to do. We may not have all of the systems in place that we need in order to be effective as public servants. And we also have people's lives in our hands. And so what that translates into is a lot of work. And the reason why I think clerkships are very short time, a year or 2, is because it's really hard to keep up with the schedule for so long, but it's intended to be an apprenticeship situation where you learn actually what it takes to be a lawyer, what it takes to practice. A lot of people that want this job eventually want to practice in this courthouse. And so you kind of want to be here and not at home, working from home. We all love working from home, but that's great. But there's a lot of things that happen at the court that you can't get over virtual court or WebEx or working from home. And there are some days where working from home may be great for you to get this order done. But really take advantage of being in a courthouse. And I think the most important part of that is watching good lawyering just as bad as bad lawyering. I think sometimes you learn by watching bad lawyers more than you do by watching good lawyers. But you really have to be committed to being a public servant and do it whatever it takes, because there are people's lives depending on your work. And you really have to care about that first, and that's paramount. In addition to that, there's going to be a lot of work that is required. And so you really have to want to be interested in the area of law, or just be interested in learning in general about people and about different areas of law, and be open. Sometimes you think you know what you want to do and you get exposed to an area of law that really piques your interest and everything changes for you. And so just be flexible. And the things that I look for are unfortunately not things that are included in the application. And that is judgment, right? How do I tell if someone has good judgment? I can't tell by reading a letter, because ultimately I spent all day in court. And so the people are interfacing with my staff and my law clerks. And if one of my law clerks is rude to someone, they would attribute that to me. Judge is rude. And I may not have even known, because I'm in court, right? Kind of dealing with the cases. And so that someone who's going to have judgment, who's going to kind of think outside the box, be proactive about what things need to happen, or how to maybe have an order ready that I may not know I need, but could really make this case go by faster if I had an order. And that's something that you learn over time. There is a great learning curve, but judgment is key. All of the things that you learn in kindergarten, how to play well in the sandbox, would you be a team player? It's called chambers for a reason. It's a tight place, and you only have like 3 people in it. And so it is a chamber, and it's a chamber because it's always pressured. There's a lot of pressure inside of chambers. And so it's like a pressure cooker all day, at least in my chambers. We're just trying to get through the calendar. There are emergency motions popping up all the time. And the other thing that's really important is confidentiality. Are you someone who can be trusted to keep confidence? Because what you share with your judge and what the judge shares with you should stay in chambers and should not be shared with anyone else. And are you going to be someone who's going to know when someone's trying to have an ex parte communication with you? I can't be in every phone call. And so those are the things that unfortunately you can't tell from an application, but you could definitely highlight in the cover letter times where you've had a job where you had to keep confidence and you've done it. Times where you had a high pressure job and you have competing deadlines and you've been able to handle that. Where you have good communication. For example, I may tell my law clerks, do this, and that. And it takes a specific law clerk to come back and say, you told me to do this, but you also told me to do this. I'm now working on this. What do you want me to do first? And be okay and not be afraid to have that conversation with me so that I can reshuffle some of your priorities for you, because I know like that order needs to go out yesterday. This one can probably wait. And so if you've ever been in any of those situations, you want to highlight that. You want to make sure that you pick references who've seen you under pressure and can speak to that as well. But, you know, ultimately, I spend a lot of time in chambers, and so probably more so than with my family. And at the end of the day, I just want to have just nice people who you're going to want to have a conversation at the end of the day with, especially when you're stressed out. And you're not going to be worried about what they're going to think about you or what they're going to say to someone else about what you just said, because you're also decompressing. It's you're on the record all day, you're being recorded, you're supposed to have a poker face. In chambers is when you can come to be with your people and show your true emotions, you know, because we can't afford to do that because we have to remain unbiased on the record. And that is really hard to do, especially when you're dealing with children being abused and really high stakes. And so we need to be able to do that. The law clerks need to be able to do that with me, and I need to be able to do it with them. And so I'm looking for all these things that unfortunately is not in the, is not something that, in addition to that, of course, you know, I want someone who's done well academically, who can write really well. And in fact, I just hired someone and I gave him a writing test, which I vowed never to do. But one of my colleagues was like, you have to do it. And it wasn't even a writing test. It was like, here's a template. This is the testimony in court, a short order, like a page or two. And please write from this template, this order. And I gave them an hour and they turned it back around because I just recently had the experience where a law clerk couldn't do that. And it's just basic stuff, right? You got to have some common sense about like what your facts are. And just because someone gives you a template doesn't mean you keep the stuff on there that doesn't apply to your case. And so I think I'm going to continue to do that because I think it was really effective in me knowing that I can count on this person to look at a template, hear some testimony, and write a short order, at least a page or two. And so basic stuff like that, if you have experience writing orders really quickly, you want to make sure you highlight that in your resume. Some people are not thinking about confidence, that confidentiality is really key in working in a small environment. I mean, if you have someone who is not a team player, it could be a really long year for everyone. And so you really have to come in and be willing to kind of pitch in. I believe that we're all on the same team. And if someone needs help, you just need to make sure that person gets the help. And that's kind of how we work. Sometimes, you know, I'll ask someone else to can you help someone with this order because it needs to come out. And I know he's working on something else. And that's kind of how we do it. We're a team environment. So anytime that you work in a team, you want to highlight that as well. It's a long-winded answer, sorry.
That's great. Great details. Thank you so much. Judge Westbrooks, did you want to go next?
You. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. So let me just make sure I'm understanding the question. The question is, what do I look for in a law clerk?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to read this quote to you for everyone, actually. And it says, and it's a quote from Martin Luther King's book, Why We Can't Wait. And it says, any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. That is what drives me every day that I come to court. That is what has driven me for the last over 25 years since I've been practicing law and been a member of the bar. And so when I'm interviewing law clerks, when I'm looking at your resume, when I'm looking at your cover letter, I'm looking for whether or not you share that same sentiment. And if you do, I like clerks that are interested in social justice, because we're going to have the same drive. We're going to look for the same things. The best clerks to me basically can almost read my mind. And I know that's probably impossible. And the students who are listening, probably thinking I can't read anybody's mind. But if you are that in sync with your judge, you can. My law clerks, when I'm interviewing, I like to get their story. You've given me your resume. I've seen what you've done, and you've given me your writing sample, and I can see basically what your writing style is like. But I really want to get to know the person. I want to know what your story is, what has driven you to become a lawyer. Are you in it for the money, just for the money? Then I'm probably not going to hire you. Are you, really in it to give of yourself? Because this profession, I was told a long time ago by my mentor, who's now like a brother to me, this profession is not for the faint of heart. So anything that you do in the profession of law, you're going to have to give your all. And when you come into a judge's chambers, and Judge Lopez, I just want to say I was almost over here, wanting to just shout, amen, 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 and just throw up my hands, amen, because a lot of what you were saying is absolutely true. First of all, you want a law clerk that is honest. You want a law clerk that has integrity. You want a law clerk that understands confidentiality, because she is absolutely right. When we go out there and we are having oral arguments in my court, we don't have a full trial. Of course, everybody understands that, we're an appellate court, we're a court of record, so we don't have trials, we have oral arguments. But, once we come off the bench, and once I come from a panel discussion with my judges, especially if I come from an en banc, meeting with my judges, I just may want to unleash. I just may want to say, some things. And my law clerks are here. Actually, I have one here with me right now who's, with me as I'm on this panel discussion. But, they are there with you through it all. And because judges lead such isolating lives, because let's face it, once you become a judge, you are isolated, because you want to make sure that you want to avoid the appearance of impropriety at all costs. You want to make sure that you are upholding the judicial code of ethics at all costs. So who you can interact with, who you are sharing your life with, becomes, very small. And your law clerks are a part of that. So there are days when my law clerks are the only people I talk to. And, and we're sharing cases, we're talking about cases for the most part, but they are also here for those other events in your life that tend to happen while you're on the bench. And every judge here knows exactly, what I'm talking about. So you want someone that understands confidentiality. You want someone who understands honesty. You do want someone who's going to give you a great work product. I didn't say perfect, I said great. And what do I mean by that? You want someone who understands, the basics of legal writing, of course. But I also want someone who's a great storyteller. These cases that we work on, although they are on the record, when we issue opinions, it's someone's life that's been affected. And unlike, the legislative branch of government, when they enact a law, that law may take effect July 1st of whatever given year. But when we hand down a decision, or when a judge issues an order, that is supposed to take effect right then and there, the day that it comes down, or the day that order is signed, the day that opinion is issued. Those actions, that behavior is supposed to be curtailed to that particular opinion or order. And so I tell my clerks all the time, what we do impacts people's real lives. I tell my judges the same thing. We're just not here to write good case law, or write something that sounds good, or catch the attention or the eye of, someone else. What we do impacts real lives. And so I expect my clerks to understand that and to look at the record, write an opinion, knowing that and understanding that. So that's what I really look for in a law clerk. There were some questions that you gave us earlier. Do I look at grades? I do look at grades, but I have never let grades stop me from hiring someone who I believe has potential. I have hired law clerks who have a 2.7 GPA. I have interviewed clerks who have had a 2.5 GPA. I have interviewed clerks who have had a 3.8, 3.9, 4.0 GPA. I have interviewed clerks that are active with the Black Law Students Association, with the Women's Association. I do tend to look at whether or not they're with the Federalist Society. So, I do look at those things, and I take that into consideration because that tells me, what you're thinking, what trajectory you want to be on, and if I can help you get to where you ultimately, want to be. So those are just some of the things that, I consider.
Thank you so much, Judge Westbrooks. Judge Chen, do you have, we would love to get your perspective on this.
Sure. I think we're running out of time too. I'll try to keep it tight. With respect to what am I looking for, I'm into what the other two judges have said. It's a challenging job, so I need someone who I know can write and do research. I'm looking for folks to help me be a better judge. I have 4 law clerks and a judicial assistant. So like the others, it's a small setting. So you need someone who's fun, who's a team player. Most days it's just us. On occasion, we go to court. We do not go to court every day. It's a 1-year clerkship. For most federal judges, it's a 1-year clerkship. District judges have either 3 law clerks or 2 law clerks, depending on how they configure their chambers. But so every year we go through this process of hiring 4 new law clerks. Most federal judges follow, get applications through the Oscar system and follow the protocols. And under the protocols, you apply roughly in June of your 2L year. If you're beyond 2L, you can apply whenever you want. But if you're 2L, you're not supposed to apply until June. Not every judge follows the protocols. The best thing for you to do is, for the students to do, is to check with their clerkship office. Most law schools have a clerkship office now. And most federal judges hire at least 2 years out, sometimes 3 years out, sometimes 4 years out. It's hard to imagine, but it's a process whereby it takes a long time. However, if you're looking for a clerkship soon, keep your eye on newly appointed federal judges. We've gone through a lot of new appointments recently. And when a newly appointed judge is confirmed, he or she is looking for a law clerk, some right away, some for a year later, some maybe for 2 years later. So those are opportunities that you should keep an eye on. It's a very competitive process. Grades are important, and that's because the quality of the applicants is so high. You're going to get people with great extracurricular activities who are really committed to the public interest, who also have a really high GPA. And so I am not a grade snob, but on the other hand, if you haven't done well grade-wise, it's just going to raise questions. And if I bring you in, and I may bring you in, then I'm going to ask you questions about that and hear what the explanation is. But before we finish, I would just really encourage all the students to seriously consider clerking. It's a wonderful experience. You set up you create a relationship with a judge, and depending on the judge, this could be someone who will be a mentor for you for years to come. And it's just a fun, exciting year.
Well, I think that's a great way, given that we're out of time, and I don't want to keep you all longer than expected. But I think that's a great way to end with the benefits of clerking. I want to thank you all so much, Judge Chen, Judge Lopez, and Judge Westbrooks, for taking the time to speak with us about your courts, being a judge, and the clerkship process. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure moderating this panel.
Thank you very much. Good job moderating.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That's great stuff.
Here.
Thank you.
Bye.